But Manu, before we get into all of that, I want to
Mm.
touch on a really interesting story that happened over the weekend. I think it's also an interesting story because it touches on why our market values are so interesting and so kind of pertinent and relevant. And that, of course, is an incredible story in the Premier League where Max Dowman became the Premier League's youngest ever goal scorer in Arsenal's 2-0 win over Everton. Dowman's an interesting player because he not only became the Premier League's youngest ever goal scorer and ironically overtook an Everton player to take that title, but he's a player that we've been keeping an eye on at Transfermarkt for a while now. He got his first ever market value back in December when he was awarded a €20 million market value. So that's his first ever market value at the start of his career. And I think that's really relevant because it was the fifth highest market value we've ever given to a player for their first ever market value. And as people can see when they see on the screen here, he's now the fifth highest, as I mentioned there, just below Callum Hudson-Odoi, who was awarded €25 million in 2019, and then Gavi and Fati at Barcelona, who were both awarded €25 million themselves in 2021 and 2019. And perhaps most recently, Lamine Yamal, who was awarded a €25 million market value in 2023. And he's certainly gone up some way since then. You could probably stick an extra zero on that, and that's closer to where he is now, which we'll touch on later in the show. I think this is really interesting right now, Manu, because not only is Dowman the most valuable player born in 2009, but he sits alongside another player in Germany, a very exciting talent in Kennet Eichhorn, the Hertha Berlin midfielder. He's also been given a market value of €20 million, exact same age. And you know a bit about him, so I thought really good opportunity to not only shine a light on Dowman and his market value and the way that he's breaking records, but also how he's already maybe got this interesting rivalry with a midfielder in Germany.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting how they got there, right? Eichhorn got his first market value in August 2025 as a 16-year-old. And the market value was just €3 million. And then it very quickly materialized that was a little low because of the way he was playing in the Zweite Bundesliga. For Hertha Berlin, a really big club in German football that is stranded in the second division and has always produced a lot of very exciting young players. Berlin sits alongside London and Paris in terms of the player pool, right? It's a very big city with a very big street footballing scene, a huge immigrant population. And that just breeds talent. That's just how it is. It's a very good environment for young players to come out. And Eichhorn is just the latest. He is from Berlin. He's a local talent. He's already been linked with all sorts of clubs. We had the Zweite Bundesliga market value update on last Friday. He did not go up in that one simply because, his benchmark was already so high. And we kind of have to see what his market is going to be in the summer. So there was no need to upgrade him. There's a lot of young players in that second division right now that have gotten significant upgrades, more so than in the past, because, Zweite Bundesliga is in a bigger focus when it comes to market value updates. But Eichhorn himself is a really fascinating player. I mean, the site that you are highlighting on our page, we can look up the most valuable players in terms of the U status, so like U19, U17, etc. But you can also look up the most valuable players born by year. And I love this site because I one of the things that I really like doing is highlighting young players, whether it is in the area that I work in North America, but also further afield, like who's the next big star coming up. And that list where he's on, where Eichhorn and Dowman dominate, this is the 2009 year group is the one that is going to write the next headlines, right? These are the kids that in 2 or 3 years we are going to talk the most about. And there's so many other great names on there. Like I look at Brian Maggio from Aston Villa, Jerry Monga from Leicester, Marley Salmon from Arsenal. There's a young kid, Calvin Sullivan, US German player who plays for Philadelphia Union, who's already signed by Man City. This is a really cool page, and I always like it. And like Eichhorn is with Dowman, without a doubt, these are the players that we're going to talk about. And I think Dowman, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's at Arsenal. Like, where is he going to go? I mean, the moon, right? It's not like he's going to be a big story in terms of the transfer market and players going to try to sign him from Arsenal. I mean, clubs might try, but the transfer fee that they would have to command to get him from a Premier League club would be significant. It's a completely different story for Eichhorn. I mean, Bayern Munich, Leipzig, Frankfurt, Premier League teams, they're already lining up to sign him. Where Hertha they have to sell him, right? So I think that's maybe where it diverges, that one of them has to make a career decision in the summer and the other one doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. I mean, I think the thing that really stands out with Dowman looking forward now, as he is trying to break into that first team, is that, yes, he's at Arsenal and yes, he's very highly regarded, but with all due respect to Arsenal, I would say they don't have a tremendous record of developing youth players under Mikel Arteta. Now, there's one obvious gold standard, and that is Bukayo Saka. And I think Dowman does draw a lot of comparisons to Saka, especially the way he kind of scored that goal the weekend, where he just dribbles through players with so much ease. He glides down the pitch with speed and technique. And Saka is undoubtedly the kind of, the real kind of gold standard, even though on last week's episode, we obviously spoke to Ben about how he's maybe struggling a little bit this season, but no one doubts that he'll be back on top in a matter of time. But there are some kind of cautionary tales. There's Nketiah, there's Balogun, maybe to an extent there's Miles Lewis-Skelly as well, who came through as a very exciting fullback / midfielder, and he's maybe really struggling to kind of live up to the initial buzz that he offered. So I think Dowman has to make sure that he can find a way to kind of avoid those pitfalls and kind of, find a way to kind of follow the kind of example that Bukayo Saka set. But yeah, as you said, Manu, you look at that list of the 2009 graduates, if you will, or the class of 2009, if you will, and Eichhorn and Dowman are definitely the ones who are standing out from it. They're almost twice as valuable, as you said, as third place player there. So yeah, it'll be a really interesting thing to keep an eye on. And obviously, as you guys are listening to the show, go check out their market values. And this is the fascinating thing about market values, Manu, is that it's not only just a case of, people looking up who's the most valuable player here, who's the most valuable player there, but it's a time capsule, it's a timeline of shows how a player does over the course of their market value. And, just to kind of throw back up that kind of list of the most valuable players or the most valuable market values that every player had when they started, Dowman's fifth with 20 million. But, you've got Hudson-Odoi, who started off at 25 million euros, who's doing okay, but never really became the player expected to be. Gavi, who we touch upon in the chat with Tobias on the show, how his market value has actually dropped down to 30 million euros because of his struggles. Fati's another one at Barcelona who struggled as well. But then, of course, Yamal has done tremendously well at Barcelona. So there's no guarantee that a high market value at this stage of their career guarantees success.
No, there's not. I mean, Hudson-Odoi is probably the best example of that, right? His market value went straight to 25 million euros because at the time, Bayern Munich were willing to pay, I think, around 50 million euros to sign him straight from Chelsea, when he wasn't even a known entity, really, wasn't he? And that pushed up his market value initially up really high. Then he tore his Achilles, and he was never the same player again, right? And that, I think, is really what you have to kind of keep in mind with this. These careers are very much determined by fitness, especially at that level. And at 16, a lot can still happen. These are the most exciting players in the world right now in that age group. But there might be 10 years from now, someone who is in that age group who we don't even have on that list yet, who's going to be the most valuable. So that is, I think, something that you always have to keep in mind.
Yeah. Absolutely. So lots to keep an eye on with both those players and the other players mentioned on that list in the class of 2009.